as I said before, I think we have to face up to the fact that our food systems are fundamentally organised as national distribution systems. Supermarkets are logistic systems for moving stuff around, and what we have as local shops are effectively dumb terminals that deliver standardised food across the country. And that totally dominates the food system. And the local food systems are tiny, insignificant, and if we're really serious about this, the move to where local food systems are really significant is absolutely humongous. Because it's not just about demand and capacity to grow, etc. It's about all the infrastructure. It's also probably about processing infrastructure. It's about education. It is a huge, huge hill to climb. And I think we have to face up to this truth to start with. This is not something you can do in your spare time. So I think economics, different ways of thinking about economics can come to help this problem, because I see all these food strategies that have visions for food justice and local food system, etc., and then the little bit about the implementation, the sort of this will be fitted into current, there's absolutely nothing to implement. And one of the most interesting things I think has happened in economics over the last 10 years is a new understanding of money. That in short, there is such a thing as a magic money tree. And it's true that the money is a social construct. And there have been previous generations of local currency, which are actually failing because of the lack of understanding of the nature of money, and also inadequate systems that they were using. But I think we can revisit in a new generation where we actually build on the idea of food vouchers, which are used quite a lot anyway around the country, certainly in England. But we think that actually these become more sophisticated in terms of being a voucher that can be the only people who can turn it back into pounds are local sustainable food producers. So you're creating a source of demand for them. You're also creating a currency that could be used to provide a return on community investment in the sort of infrastructure we need. And that means also that this becomes not something just the impoverished use, but becomes a wider currency. So it loses the stigma of poverty, which is a real problem, and becomes something that can be built and introduced more and more to build up a local food economic system. It hasn't been done before, but what I'm really interested in doing is find a place where we can try and model this and pilot it, because unless it is out there as an idea, but we have a huge mountain to climb, and I think we should be trialling innovative, different ideas, and not just trying to do the same thing if we're going to get anywhere. Thank you.
That's the point I might come back to, Henry. I suppose for me, a couple of points to expand on, which I sort of trailed earlier. One is around how do we get the ownership systems right for actually delivering what colleagues have outlined as a key ambition here. And I spoke a bit about, incidentally, there was just a session that Henry and colleagues were involved in this tent on natural capital investment and markets. So hopefully some of you were in that session. If you weren't, find someone who was, because it was a really fascinating sort of run through all of the options there. If you don't know anyone, then invent a time machine when you get home and come back and visit again. So for me, I think, as I say, there's that kind of shift in dimension of moving from the private into the utilitarian space, or into the public ownership space, or into the community ownership space. I think the real challenging area is we talk often about community ownership, and there's grants available, there's potential funding available, there's loans available. Scottish National Investment Bank has been set up, and a UK investment infrastructure bank, slightly different offer. These are really good to have, and they're very inaccessible to small communities. So there's something for me around that community capacity building, and we probably talk about that a lot in a huge number of contexts. But what's a kind of practical solution? What's a practical way into that? So I spoke earlier about, how do we do this without new investment, or starting off without new investment? And a lot of where I'm spending my time at the moment is recognising or mapping or thinking about the system that already is with us in terms of public sector spend. So if you look at my organisation alone, we spend £500 million a year on goods and services. Now, a lot of that's in the capital space, and we were actually quite good in terms of driving community benefit in those situations. And a lot of it is in services and small value contracts where we're not so good. And we recognise that as an organisation. And what we're looking to do is move that into locally validated spend. And it's quite a difficult concept at first because it's not participatory budgeting, because we're not asking you to take a sum of money and allocate it. It's not grant giving. It's not even loans. It's, if you could direct local spend across a huge range of values and projects that matter to you, including community ownership of land for all sorts of purposes, what would that look like? We're looking to pilot that in one part of Fife and hopefully roll that out, and then link that into a kind of broader community wealth building agenda around fair work and real living wage, etc. The second point I want to expand on is that skills point. So thank you for the market research. But where I see a real opportunity locally is to steal a march on those rural skills, particularly linking it to smart and digital, because I think that feels like a coming area where we're going to need that continuing professional development in the rural sector. So firstly, getting more people in and making people recognise that growing food is or nurturing food, being part of that food system, is a sustainable future for them as individuals, particularly if they don't have that background. Here in Fife, a lot of young people are directed by what their grandparents or their parents think might still be jobs and aren't jobs anymore. So how do we kind of change the dial on some of that, and what systems do we need in place? So I think that's what I'm passionate about. Probably just to finally say, really interested in Henry's points around the system as it is now, and do we have a kind of fighting chance for local small producers? If we move out of agriculture and into aquaculture, some 90% of what's caught off Fife shores leaves the UK straight away, in terms of our crab, lobster, etc., straight out of the country, and nearly 100% leave Fife. So how do we actually change that, bend that dial back, into the sort of virtuous circle of greater use equals greater local investment equals greater community wealth retention. So you can see that model certainly. So I take your point around the system starting off being broken and very challenging. Now a lot of large organisations in our area benefit from that. There's a lot of employment in the model that you've described, but there could be a hell of a lot more if we break the system apart and start to think differently.
So I come from healthcare, and I have to agree entirely with every word Carolyn said about the importance of diet for our health. I work in cancer, and cancer patients respond to immunotherapy if they've got a healthy gut, and they don't if they haven't. And we've got very good evidence. So I think we have to get rid of ultra-processed food. It's really bad for us. The problem is we no longer cook the natural foods. We go and get the quick ready meals.
It's the inconvenience of convenience.
Yes, but actually, with NICE, we do quality adjusted life years to decide whether a drug is worth paying NHS money for. And we should do that with foods. And I actually love Henry's idea of these coupons. I don't think we pay nearly enough for our food. And I'd love you to think about how we could pay more for our food without it being socially unjust.
Oh, who's that directed to? Oh, would you like it from everybody?
No, just one of you will do.
Who would like to answer?
I wanted to say, I'm not going to answer all of it, but just one point on the teaching people to grow food. So before moving to Dumfries and Galloway, cook food, yeah. Before moving to Dumfries and Galloway, I did 13 years in community food in Glasgow, and know Jenny quite well from that. I got really disillusioned from teaching healthy cooking courses. We ran a programme called Great Grub through Urban Roots, which is an environmental and health improvement organisation on the south side, and a programme called Veg Power through Propagate. 6 people at a time, 2 hours a week for 6 weeks, with a whole range of kind of vegetable-filled meals. It's 500,000 people in Glasgow. It was barely scratching the surface, and whether that you kind of wonder whether that messaging is actually getting taken home, and then you kind of do a follow-up with somebody 3 months later who seemed to excel in the group and ask them if they've changed their dietary habits, and ultimately the answer was no. And that was very much an informal one, very small groups, having a nice chat and a lovely time and a beautiful experience in the kitchen. And I was like, if you can't achieve it through that, I don't know where you go. So I'd love there to be a magic bullet that actually solves that problem. But a lot of these people are living in low-income areas, and there's a chippy on the corner, but that doesn't sell obviously healthy produce. But again, my question to Henry, actually, if I can, is who's footing the bill? It kind of relates to that point. Who's paying for those vouchers?
Well, at the moment, vouchers are, as are used, the Rose
as under.
Yeah, they create a coalition of funders behind them, including businesses and so on. The key is that because it's a currency rather than just, at the moment, their vouchers are just exchangeable with retailers. So this is a system which is actually building the economy, and hopefully, this is the case of experimenting, how you can keep that currency flowing through the system without it actually being turned back into pounds, so that you're getting a certain amount of a free lunch out of it, and you're getting multiple benefits. So you're getting health, and so involving the NHS as a part funder as well, and getting a coalition of people interested in sustainability, health, addressing food poverty, etc. And I think at the same time, at the moment, the whole food bank system is collapsing, because food banks are getting to the point where they can't get enough food waste, excess food, to meet the demand. So they're suddenly having to start buying up food direct to try and make it happen. And the people running food banks are becoming burnt out. So you've got a sort of sticking plaster which is collapsing. So and so I think there is an interest in trying something different, which is what.
I'm just going to come and try and do a good side to the story on this, so it's not all doom and gloom. We ran the last of the leader funding. We ran a project called Southwest Fife Project, which worked with 5 food banks, and we were looking at it really as the ability of these food banks not to be a negative thing, but an incredibly important part of their community and what they did. And how could we support them? And how could we create a network in a particular region and engage with them, with the local farmers, so that they became food hubs, and they could buy in through local farms, local food. We supplied them with cooking kitchens. We funded them with kitchens. They have waiting lists for 2 years now for the cooking classes. They became community hubs, so we had engagement, we had talks where food is emotional. It's part of people's lives. And some people, and each of the sessions we brought food to share, and we had lunch together, and the amount of conversation that we had about how we could move food forward and engagement on that. And when you break bread together, you learn together, and you feel that you can make a change more easily because other people are doing it with you and they're the same as you, and you're sitting down having dinner together. It's so important to eat in that respect. So we try to support the hubs and take them on to the next level with our training kitchens, with freezers for food, for contacts for local food, and then going back to our strategy, we're looking at our food hubs, because of course FareShare is running out of food, because Tesco's is getting better at not having the waste, in going through our procurement, so that food hubs could maybe look at working with our procurement in Fife Council and our distribution units at Fife Council as well. It's part of the strategy that we're looking at, and we're trying to develop it. So there will probably be some pilots coming up, but we've done a lot of really good work about how to work. And then the network in South West Fife all started wanting to buy together, because if they buy together, they're in a stronger force. And if they then come through the procurement system, we are looking at a rolling stone that may actually improve the price, the injustice, and maintain valuable community hubs, rather than take the food hub away, or the food bank, make it something more positive, so we're not having to replace it at a later date with something that's going to cost more money, when we keep it there. Anyway, that was just an example of some positivity that we've been doing in Fife.
Anybody else?
You can clap that, it was brilliant.
We'll go gentleman over here. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe I just jump in. I also wanted to comment on the issue before about food education, and then an intervention being made about how hard it is to kind of capitalize on skills that are learned, and going back to old habits and maybe not implementing that into actionable things. And I was thinking, maybe one problem is that we still stick to a system where everyone eats privately in their house. Maybe we need to find systems where people eat together. And how can we eat together? Public canteens, schools. So maybe we can find systems where we give people food where they are, at work, at school, and subsidize it by the government to bring in food from people that produce the good food. And everyone eats. Everyone eats at work, everyone eats at school. So we have a system where people get the good food without us having to teach them good cooking or get them to buy that good food. So maybe we can implement systems like that in order to reach a wider audience for that kind of food. And then a second thing that I was thinking about when we were sitting here, we were really concentrating on private initiatives, linking people and finding these kinds of solutions. But when do we talk about the big animal being subsidies being directed by the highest level, the national level, that subsidizes an agricultural system that is apparently failing us when we talk in these discussions here? And how can we direct these subsidies to people who would need it, our small-scale, regenerative, sustainable producers? So maybe how can we find that structural change in order to fund the things that we want to see?
You mentioned in terms of the percentage of food that was consumed in Fife being produced in Fife. There's an X%, I think you said, Carolyn.
Well, it depends on markets, because you've got exports as well. So it's not a decision that I can sort of talk about at the moment, because it needs to be discussed with all the food producers in Fife and the economics of it. So it's not a journey that we can do right at this minute. We can start that journey off, because we've got a data project coming up, right, where we look at, because our procurement team are going, we can't buy it unless we know where it's grown, right? So we're looking at where it's grown. We're looking in the future, so we look at the blue infrastructure, because we have droughts in Fife, believe it or not, and if we're growing vegetables particularly, you need water. So climate change is going to disperse that water in all different ways, too much or too little, it's something. So do we need to have underground tanks? Do we need to have storage units? So we're looking at, within the strategy, like I talked of, de-risking and looking at how we can grow and flourish in that. And in that process and in that data collection, we'll start to understand where we can go with that. So it's an X amount, because we don't know what the local market could be, and we don't know what infrastructure we need to be able, and what cost that is. So we would love to be working with consultants to come in and actually cost the action plans that we're doing to try and create that infrastructure, so we know exactly what each section will cost, and then we'll understand what the value of it will be as well going forward.
Brilliant, thank you. If I can put you on the spot. Like recognising, and you did at the beginning, like recognising the extent of the emergency that we're facing, like given that, like what kind of percentage would be ideal from that perspective, rather than starting from what is possible in a certain time scale on the ground? You see what I mean?
Yeah, I understand that. I'm not sure whether the percentages are the important question there. Is how much of the food that we produce is produced in a climate-friendly way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing. At the moment, we still we have many incredibly inspiring organic farmers and regenerative farmers. I mean, Balgaspi and Balberni and Ninian and everybody that are here, an amazing amount of people that are doing incredible work. That's 1% of, if that, maybe 5 if we're lucky. I haven't worked out all the numbers out, but we have a long way to go to work with our farmers and our primary producers, our secondary producers, our processors, the big guys in Fife that are doing that. We need to all come together, and this is where our economic plan and talking and getting all those people, and that's the next stage, is actually getting all the decision makers together and say, how can we do this together, guys? So it's not for Fife Council to say it's going to be X amount, because we're not in control of that. What we can say is, this is the ambition, this is the science behind it, this is how communities grow, and we can use our expertise, our economic expertise, our health and well-being. We've got the NHS, Joanne Valentine chairs our Food for Fife partnership. We're linked in with community food. It's a partnership, and it's the partnership that will come together and make those decisions and step by step, and then we'll get to that understanding. Yeah, so I'm sorry.